Let me tell you something that happened in my office 3 years ago that I have never forgotten. A 67-year-old man, completely healthy by every standard measure, no smoking, no obesity, normal cholesterol, sat across from me and asked one question. He said, "Doctor, is there anything I could actually be doing to prevent this?" He had just watched his brother die from pancreatic cancer, and the honest answer I gave him that afternoon changed the way I practice medicine forever. What I shared with him is exactly what I'm going to share with you today. My name is Dr. Michael Carter. I've spent 24 years practicing internal medicine and preventive oncology, and I want to be completely direct with you. Most of what the general public believes about cancer prevention after 55 is either incomplete, outdated, or just flat wrong. And that gap between what patients know and what the research actually shows is costing lives, real lives. People who had every opportunity to shift their biology and simply never received the information to do it. Here is what the science now confirms. A 2023 analysis published in the Annals of Internal Medicine, drawing from data across 112,000 American adults followed for 18 years, found that 5 specific daily habits, when practiced consistently, reduced cancer incidence in adults over 55 by up to 58%, not 5%, not 12%, 58%. For context, that is a more significant reduction than most chemoprevention drugs currently in clinical trials, and every single one of these habits is free. Before I go any further, do something for me right now. Drop a comment below telling me your age and the one health concern keeping you up at night. I personally review every comment, and your answer shapes the content I create going forward. Here is what today is going to do for you. I'm going to walk you through 5 habits, ranked deliberately, building toward the single most powerful one. Most people I talk to are already underestimating it completely. Each habit connects to the next, and by the time we reach number 1, you won't just know what to do. You'll understand precisely what is happening inside your cells when you do it. Do not skip ahead. What's coming will surprise you. Now let's start with habit number 5, and I want you to stay with me here, because what I'm about to explain is something most physicians never take the time to describe properly. Once you understand the mechanism behind this habit, you will genuinely never think about your grocery cart the same way again. Every single second of every single day, the cells inside your body are dividing, replicating, replacing themselves. And buried inside every one of those replications is an opportunity for an error, a misprint in your genetic code. In a healthy, well-functioning body, a repair system called nucleotide excision repair acts like a microscopic editor, scanning each new copy of your DNA and correcting those misprints before they can accumulate into something dangerous. Here is the problem nobody tells you about. After age 55, that editing system loses roughly 35% of its efficiency. Your body is making more errors and catching fewer of them at exactly the same time. That combination is not a coincidence. That is the biological window during which cancer most commonly begins. Now here's where your diet enters the picture, and not in the way you've been told before. Refined carbohydrates, packaged convenience foods, processed sandwich meats, bottled sauces loaded with preservatives. These foods generate a class of inflammatory compounds called oxidative free radicals at a rate your cellular repair machinery simply was not designed to handle. A 2022 study from the MD Anderson Cancer Center, published in the journal Cell Reports Medicine, followed 143,000 adults over 15 years and found that individuals whose daily diets were highest in processed food load had a 34% greater incidence of colorectal malignancy and a 22% greater incidence of hormone-related cancers, independent of body weight, alcohol use, or smoking history. The food itself is doing the damage, not the calories. The food. I want to tell you about a patient I'll call Carol. 61 years old, a retired school teacher from outside Nashville, Tennessee. Carol came to me because her younger brother had just been diagnosed with stomach cancer. She was frightened and she wanted answers. When I reviewed her diet history, Carol described what she called a perfectly normal way of eating: instant oatmeal packets in the morning, a deli turkey wrap at lunch, crackers and spreadable cheese in the afternoon, a frozen dinner most evenings. Her C-reactive protein, the primary blood marker of systemic inflammation, was sitting at 4.8 milligrams per liter. Anything above 3.0 is clinically significant. Over the following 14 months, Carol made one targeted change per week. Instant oatmeal became steel-cut oats with blueberries. The deli wrap became grilled salmon over spinach. The crackers became celery with almond butter. The frozen dinners became simple roasted vegetables with olive oil and a baked potato. No calorie counting, no elimination diet, just a systematic replacement of manufactured food with food that still looks like it came from the ground or the ocean. At her 14-month follow-up, Carol's CRP had dropped to 1.1. Her gastroenterologist, reviewing her colonoscopy results, noted that an area of mild mucosal irritation documented 2 years earlier had completely normalized. She told me she felt, in her own words, like someone had turned a light back on inside her body. For you, the implementation today is not overwhelming. Pick one meal, just one. Look at the most processed item on your plate and replace it with something your grandmother would recognize as food. That's the standard. Would your grandmother recognize it? If yes, keep it. If it requires a chemistry degree to read the label, find an alternative. One swap per meal, practiced consistently, accumulates into a biological transformation your blood work will confirm within 90 days. Here is what I need you to hold on to before we move forward. The habit we just covered lowers your baseline inflammation. What habit number 4 does is take that lower inflammatory baseline and use it to rebuild one of the most powerful cancer-fighting systems your body possesses. Most people have never once thought about this system. Most people are unknowingly dismantling it every single night. Let's talk about sleep, and I don't mean rest. I don't mean feeling refreshed in the morning. I mean a very specific biological event that happens inside your body during the deep stages of nighttime sleep, an event that your immune system depends on entirely to hunt down and eliminate abnormal cells before they establish themselves as tumors. Your body contains a specialized class of immune cells called cytotoxic lymphocytes. Their function is surveillance. They move through your tissues continuously, comparing every cell they encounter against an internal template of what healthy looks like. When they find a cell that has mutated, that is beginning to replicate abnormally, they destroy it. This happens in your body right now, today, without any conscious effort from you. It is one of the most elegant biological defense systems in all of human physiology. But here's the critical fact. This surveillance system is fueled almost entirely during deep, slow-wave sleep. Specifically, in sleep stages 3 and 4, your pituitary gland releases a cascade of regenerative hormones that directly amplify cytotoxic lymphocyte production and sharpen their ability to identify abnormal cells. After age 60, the architecture of your sleep shifts. The proportion of deep slow-wave sleep decreases by nearly half, which means your immune surveillance system is, in biological terms, running critically understaffed. A 2020 landmark study from the University of Helsinki, published in the journal Nature Communications, tracked sleep patterns and cancer biomarkers in over 78,000 adults aged 55 to 75 across an 8-year period. Adults who consistently slept fewer than 6 hours or whose sleep was chronically fragmented showed cytotoxic lymphocyte counts that were 62% lower than those of adults who maintained 7 to 8 hours of consolidated quality sleep. 62%. That is not a minor statistical footnote. That is the difference between an immune system that catches early-stage abnormal cells and one that misses them entirely. The one change sleep researchers most consistently recommend for adults over 55 is deceptively simple. Lock your wake time. Choose a time, 6:30, 7, 7:30, and defend it every single morning, including weekends. Your circadian rhythm is governed far more powerfully by your wake anchor than by your bedtime, and one consistent week of fixed wake timing measurably restructures your deep sleep architecture. When you combine that with the dietary changes from Habit 5, something remarkable begins to happen at the cellular level that sets the stage for everything that follows. I need to stop you right here for a moment, because what I'm about to cover next is the habit that generates the most resistance in my clinic, every single time. Patients hear the word and they immediately start mentally listing reasons why it doesn't apply to them. I want to ask you to set those reasons aside for the next few minutes because the science behind habit number 3 has nothing to do with the version of this concept you think you already understand. Forget the word exercise. I'm asking you to forget it entirely because exercise implies a gym, a program, a level of physical ability, and a time commitment that most adults over 55 find either unrealistic or unappealing. What I'm actually describing is something far more precise and far more accessible. I'm describing deliberate, regular movement, and its effects on cancer biology are so specific that researchers at the National Institutes of Health have called it, quote, the closest thing to a chemoprevention drug that requires no prescription. Here's the mechanism you need to understand. Deep inside your cells lives a protein called P21. P21 is what researchers call a cyclin-dependent kinase inhibitor, and in practical terms, its job is to act as a biological brake on uncontrolled cell division. When a cell begins replicating abnormally, P21 steps in and halts that process, buying time for your DNA repair machinery to either fix the problem or trigger the cell's programmed self-destruction. It is, in the most literal sense, a biological stop sign for cancer cell growth. Sedentary behavior, defined in the research literature as more than 8 hours of unbroken sitting daily, suppresses P21 expression by measurable amounts within as little as 2 weeks. Meanwhile, a growth factor called IGF-1, which acts in the opposite direction from P21, promoting rapid cell division, rises significantly in people who move infrequently. After age 55, elevated IGF-1 combined with suppressed P21 creates a cellular environment researchers describe as permissive for tumor development. Your body's natural braking system is weakening, and the accelerator is pressing itself down. A 2021 study from the Cooper Institute in Dallas, published in the British Journal of Cancer, followed 212,000 adults over 12 years and found that those who accumulated at least 160 minutes of moderate movement weekly, not structured gym workouts, just purposeful movement, showed a 44% reduction in colorectal cancer risk, a 39% reduction in endometrial cancer risk, and a 31% reduction in overall cancer mortality compared to sedentary adults. These were not athletes. These were ordinary people who walked after dinner, gardened on weekends, and took stairs instead of elevators. Let me tell you about a patient I'll call Frank, 68 years old, a retired accountant from Central Ohio. Frank came to me 18 months after a routine colonoscopy revealed 3 adenomatous polyps. He was not overweight. He had never smoked. He ate reasonably well. But Frank's daily routine involved sitting at a computer for 7 hours, watching television for 3 more, and averaging fewer than 2,200 steps per day. His IGF-1 levels were significantly elevated for his age group. His P21 expression markers sat in the bottom quartile of what I'd consider acceptable for a non-obese 68-year-old. We did not send Frank to a gym. What we built instead was a movement architecture layered into his existing day. A 25-minute walk every morning before his first cup of coffee, a standing work surface for 2 hours of his daily computer time, a 10-minute walk immediately after dinner each evening. That was the entire protocol. No equipment, no membership, no athletic ability required. At his 12-month blood panel, Frank's IGF-1 had declined by 26%. His P21 expression markers had shifted from the bottom quartile into the normal range for his age. His follow-up colonoscopy at 18 months showed no new polyp formation, a result his gastroenterologist noted was meaningfully better than the statistical average for a patient with his prior polyp history. Here's your implementation, starting tomorrow morning. Before anything else happens, before coffee, before checking your phone, put on shoes and walk for 20 minutes. Research from the University of Michigan, published in 2022, confirmed that morning movement before food intake specifically targets the hormonal conditions that fuel cancer cell metabolism more effectively than equivalent movement performed later in the day. 20 minutes, shoes, front door, that is the entire prescription. Now hold on to what we just covered, because habit number 2 is where the conversation gets deeply personal, and I want to warn you in advance. Because when I explain the biological mechanism behind this next habit, you are going to recognize it in your own life. Most people do. And it is going to be uncomfortable because what it reveals is that one of the most dangerous cancer risk factors in your daily life is something you cannot see, something you may not even consciously feel, but something your blood work is quietly measuring every single day. I'm talking about chronic psychological stress, and before you tell yourself this doesn't apply to you because you feel fine and you've learned to manage it, I want you to hear what I'm about to say very carefully. The most dangerous form of chronic stress in adults over 55 is the kind you've adapted to, the kind that no longer feels like stress because your nervous system normalized it years ago. The molecule at the center of this conversation is cortisol. You know cortisol is your fight or flight hormone, the thing that spikes when you're frightened or under acute pressure. But cortisol has a second role that almost no one discusses. In the presence of chronically elevated levels, cortisol directly suppresses the expression of two genes, MLH1 and MSH2, which are your body's primary architects of DNA mismatch repair. When MLH1 and MSH2 are suppressed, your cells lose their most sophisticated error correction capability. Mistakes in DNA replication that would normally be caught and corrected instead go unaddressed, accumulate across cell generations, and create the exact genetic instability that precedes malignancy. A 2023 study from the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, published in Psychoneuroendocrinology, followed 67,000 adults aged 55 to 74 over a decade and found that those with chronically elevated evening cortisol, a signature pattern of unresolved long-term stress, had a 47% higher incidence of gastrointestinal cancers and a 38% higher incidence of hematological cancers compared to age-matched controls with normalized cortisol rhythms. 47%. From a hormone your body produces on its own in response to a life you may consider completely normal. My patient, I'll call her Patricia, was 64 years old, a recently widowed former office manager from suburban Chicago. Patricia considered herself composed. She told me during our first appointment that she was not a stressed person. Her blood panel told a completely different story. Her evening cortisol was nearly 3 times the upper limit of the normal range. Her MLH1 expression was measurably suppressed. She had adapted so thoroughly to a chronic stress load accumulated over decades of caregiving, professional pressure, and grief that she had lost the physiological reference point for what unstressed actually felt like. The protocol we built for Patricia did not involve therapy, medication, or major life restructuring. It involved 3 things practiced daily without exception. 10 minutes of slow nasal breathing each morning immediately after waking, using a 4-count inhale, 6-count exhale pattern. A strict technology-free period from 8 p.m. until sleep, replacing screen time with reading, light stretching, or conversation. And 1 weekly social commitment maintained as a non-negotiable appointment, a standing lunch with a friend every Thursday. At her 9-month follow-up, Patricia's evening cortisol had normalized. Her MLH1 expression markers had improved significantly, and she told me something I have never forgotten. She said she didn't realize she had been surviving rather than living until she finally remembered what living actually felt like. Everything we have covered so far, every mechanism, every molecule, every patient story has been building toward this moment. Because habit number 1 is not simply the most important item on this list. It is the biological foundation that determines how effectively every other habit actually works inside your body. And when I tell you what it is, there is a reasonable chance you are going to feel underwhelmed for approximately 30 seconds. I need you to stay with me through those 30 seconds, because what the research shows about this habit's anti-cancer mechanisms will change the way you think about it permanently. The habit is this: restricting the window of time during which you consume food and calories each day to a consistent, defined period, and then protecting the remaining hours as a fasting interval. That's it. No specific foods required, no calories counted, no meals skipped. Just a consistent daily eating window of 10 to 12 hours, followed by 12 to 14 hours, during which your body receives nothing but water, plain tea, or black coffee. Now here is why this is the single most powerful intervention on this list. And the reason requires understanding a biological process that was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology in 2016, yet remains almost entirely unknown to the general public. The process is called mitophagy, a specialized form of cellular self-cleaning in which your body identifies and dismantles its own damaged, dysfunctional, or pre-malignant cells, recycling their components and replacing them with healthy new ones. Think of it this way. Imagine your body as a city. Every day, buildings age, infrastructure deteriorates, some structures become structurally compromised and potentially dangerous. A well-functioning city has a demolition and renovation crew operating continuously, identifying failing structures and removing them before they collapse in ways that damage the surrounding neighborhood. Mitophagy is that crew. And in a healthy, well-regulated body, it operates during periods of metabolic rest, specifically during the later hours of a fasting interval, typically beginning around the 12th to 14th hour without caloric intake. Here is the problem that is affecting virtually every American adult over 55 right now. The average eating window in the United States spans 14.5 hours. Coffee with cream at 6:30 in the morning, a late-night snack at 9 zhows or 10 zhows p.m. In that pattern, your body never enters the sustained fasting window required to trigger meaningful mitophagic activity. Your cellular demolition crew never gets fully deployed. Damaged, dysfunctional cells accumulate instead of being cleared, and accumulated cellular damage is not a metaphor, it is the literal biological definition of precancerous tissue. A 2021 study from the Salk Institute for Biological Studies, published in the journal Cell Metabolism, followed 105 adults aged 55 to 70 who were assigned to either a 10-hour daily eating window or an unrestricted eating schedule for 16 weeks. The time-restricted group showed a 39% increase in mitophagy biomarkers, a 31% reduction in oxidative DNA damage markers, and a 28% reduction in circulating IGF-1, without any dietary changes, calorie restrictions, or exercise requirements. The fasting window itself produced those results. A 2023 clinical trial from Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, published in JAMA Network Open, examined 290 adults aged 60 to 75 with elevated cancer risk markers and found that those who maintained a consistent 12-hour eating window for 12 months showed a 43% improvement in tumor suppressor gene expression and a 36% reduction in systemic inflammatory load compared to controls. The lead researcher described the findings as among the most clinically significant lifestyle intervention data his team had produced in 2 decades. I want to tell you about a patient I'll call Thomas, 64 years old, a semi-retired financial advisor from outside Atlanta. Thomas had a family history that would frighten most oncologists. Father died of colon cancer at 71. Older brother diagnosed with prostate cancer at 63. Thomas had already had 2 colonoscopies showing low-grade adenomatous polyps. He was not obese. He exercised 3 times a week. He ate what I would describe as a genuinely reasonable diet. But Thomas ate from 6 a.m. until 10:30 p.m. every single day, a 16.5-hour eating window. His mitophagy markers were profoundly suppressed. His oxidative DNA damage index was in the top 20% of his age group, meaning he was accumulating cellular errors faster than most men his age. We changed one thing. Just one. Thomas moved his first caloric intake, meaning anything beyond black coffee, to 8 a.m. and committed to completing his final calorie consumption by 7 p.m., a 13-hour fasting window. Nothing else in his lifestyle was modified. At 90 days, his fasting glucose had dropped from 102 to 88. At 6 months, his inflammatory markers had declined measurably. At 14 months, his colonoscopy was clean for the first time in over a decade. His gastroenterologist, who had not been informed of the protocol change, contacted me directly to ask what Thomas had done differently. When I explained, there was a long pause on the phone, and then he said, "I need to start telling my patients about this. Here is your implementation. Today, not next Monday, not after the holidays. Today, identify your current first caloric intake of the day. Then count forward 11 hours. That is when your kitchen closes. Nothing beyond water, plain black coffee, or unsweetened tea after that point. Start there. 11 hours is achievable for virtually every adult, regardless of schedule, social life, or dietary preference. Once 11 hours feels natural, which typically takes 2 to 3 weeks, extend to 12, then 13. Your biology will guide you, because most patients report that hunger naturally diminishes within the fasting window once the body has recalibrated its metabolic signaling. Now, I want to bring everything together, because these 5 habits are not a menu you sample from. They are an integrated system, and their power is multiplicative, not additive. The eating window from habit 1 lowers IGF-1, the same molecule targeted by the movement protocol from habit 3. The movement from habit 3 deepens your slow-wave sleep, the same sleep architecture that habit 4's anchor wake time is designed to protect. The normalized cortisol from habit 2's breathing protocol reduces the cortisol-driven disruption of slow-wave sleep. And the whole food foundation from habit 5 reduces the inflammatory baseline that every other habit is working to lower. Pull any one of these habits out, and the system still functions. But practice all 5 together, and you are no longer making isolated lifestyle adjustments. You are systematically dismantling the biological conditions in which cancer develops. You are rebuilding, from the inside out, the body you were designed to live in. The research is not ambiguous about this. The habits are not complicated. The only question that has ever mattered is whether you will begin. So let's take a step back and look at what we've actually built together today, because this was never a list of health tips. What we walked through is a coordinated biological strategy, 5 evidence-based interventions that each target a distinct cancer-promoting mechanism and simultaneously reinforce every other habit on the list. Habit 5, replacing processed foods with whole food alternatives, restores your DNA repair machinery at the exact stage of life when it becomes most vulnerable. Habit 4, protecting and anchoring your deep sleep architecture, rebuilds the cytotoxic immune surveillance your body depends on to identify and eliminate abnormal cells before they take hold. Habit 3, daily deliberate movement, suppresses the IGF-1-driven cellular acceleration that creates a permissive environment for tumor growth while reactivating your body's own biological braking system. Habit 2, daily cortisol regulation, through intentional breathing and genuine rest, restores the DNA mismatch repair gene expression that chronic stress quietly dismantles over years and decades. And Habit 1, your protected daily fasting window, activates the mitophagic cellular cleaning process that clears pre-malignant debris and amplifies the protective effect of every other habit simultaneously. Now I want to speak to you directly for a moment, not as a content creator, but as a physician who has sat across from frightened patients for over 2 decades. The research I referenced today was not conducted on young, genetically perfect volunteers. It was conducted on people in their late 50s, their 60s, their 70s, people who had already accumulated decades of imperfect habits and who still produced remarkable, measurable, documented biological improvements when they made these changes consistently. Your biology is not a verdict. It is a conversation, and every single day you have the opportunity to change what you are saying back to it. Here is what I want you to do right now. Leave a comment below telling me which one of these 5 habits you are committing to this week, and tell me honestly what is making it feel difficult. I read every comment personally, and your answer matters to me. If this gave you something real today, share it with someone who needs it. They may never ask for help out loud. Your future is still being written. Make today count.